So let me get my trusty markers out and we'll get to the first question. Now, the first question was sent in to me and I thought this was an interesting question. And it's a common question, by the way. I've heard a lot of students ask me this question. So I'm going to talk about it today and hopefully clear up the mystery of this language structure. So the question is, when should I use rather and when should I use prefer? Now, I'm going to remind you of something I've said many times on the show, which is that when we talk about language, we're talking about three characteristics. And it's useful to think about them at all times when we're examining some language. So there's a kind of trilogy of factors with the language. So there's the form, the grammar rule, the structure, or the rule about something. And it can also include what part of speech the word is. Is it a noun? Is it a verb? Is it an adjective? All of those considerations are related to the form. But words and sentences also express meanings, right? They express meanings, ideas, thoughts. And there's also a consideration about how we use it. Because regardless of form and meaning, we use things in certain ways. And this is where we talk about things like idioms or slang, or strange expressions that we use only in certain contexts. So the context or the situation often tells us how we use something, okay? So we have to think about all three factors. And now, for example, the word prefer, let's talk about its form. The form is, prefer is a verb. That's a verb. It's an action. It's something you do. Rather is not a verb. It's an adverb. It's also used as an intensifier or a down intensifier, a down toner, but it's really an adverb. It describes a verb. So that tells us that we have to use them very differently in a sentence. They occupy different positions and they have different functions in a sentence. So that's important. So we have two different forms, okay? However, to prefer something means you like this more than this, right? You like one thing more than the other. You prefer this over this. That's what it means. What does rather mean? Well, rather means you rather this over this. So both of them are expressing the same idea, that one thing is better than the other, according to you. So the meaning, there's one meaning. They both share the same meaning, but their forms are different. Now, how about the use? How do we use them? Well, we use them differently, okay? We use prefer as a verb only, right? Therefore, it can only function after a subject, right? Paul prefers pizza over hamburger, okay? So it's only got basically one use. But because rather is an adverb, and an adverb can move around in a sentence, the way we use rather is different. There are more options for using rather. So let me show you some examples. Let's say we have two choices. We have a moose. That's a Canadian animal called a moose, not a mouse, a moose. Let's say you have a moose. That's one choice. And you have a rabbit or a bunny, okay? And you have to choose which one you like more, which one you prefer. Well, I prefer rabbits. I think they're cute. Moose is kind of a big, stinky animal. It's impressive, right? It's a huge animal. It's strong and powerful. It's impressive, but it's not very cute. I mean, this one's cute because it's a toy, but in real life, they're not so cute. Rabbits are cute. In fact, where I live, there's a park nearby and there's a bunch of rabbits there. I like going for a walk every day and saying hi to them. They're nice. Makes me smile every day. So, how do I say that? Well, I might say, I prefer rabbits over, we need a preposition to show the relationship between the nouns. We could also use to. let's change this to a singular just to be clear. I prefer the rabbit over the moose. Okay? Now I can't move that word because it's a verb. It needs to be there. I prefer, right? There's our subject, there's our verb. I prefer. That's the only way I can use that word. Okay? But what if the verb is something different, like be? What if we're talking about what you'd rather be? Which one you like to be? Well, I can say, I would rather be a moose than a rabbit. Now, this is a little bit different because we're using the verb be. Now, I like looking at rabbits. They're cute. But if I have a choice of which animal I would be in a magic world where you could change from human to animal, I would rather be a moose. Why? Well, the poor rabbit gets eaten by a lot of other animals. Cats, dogs, bear, I don't know, wild giant cats in the mountains. They eat rabbits. I'm actually not so expert on animals, so if you know what animals eat rabbits, please tell me. But the moose has a better chance of surviving. It's a huge, strong animal. Nobody is going to, eat that moose very easily, except humans. Okay? There's probably some wild cat in the mountain, like mountain cat, or what do they call those? Some kind of wild, large mountain lions probably eat the moose in the mountains of Canada, but most animals are not going to be able to challenge the moose. So the moose is going to survive. If I'm an animal, I'd rather survive. So I would rather be. Now look at where this word is. Rather be. It's describing the verb be. But in both sentences, we're expressing preference, right? I prefer the rabbit over the moose. Now here we're just talking about which one you like more. Preference, that's the noun version. Preference just tells us what you like more. But here I wanted to use the verb be. Which animal would you rather be? Rather be. That tells me I want to be a moose more, right? The moose is my first choice. So that's how you use rather to express the similar idea. Now let's change that idea to make it even more similar. So if you asked someone, which animal do you like more? Well, I prefer the rabbit over the moose. I would rather be a moose. I would rather see a moose or see a rabbit, right? It could be anything. It all depends on the verb you're using. Now, there's another way to use rather. Like I said before, there's lots of different ways because, there's lots of different ways to use this. So we can start a sentence. We can start a sentence with rather and connect it to the last sentence. So you might say something like this. I don't want to be a rabbit because big animals eat them. Now you end the sentence, then you can start a new sentence. Rather, comma, I want to be a moose. Because without that, it sounds really simplified, right? I don't want to be a rabbit, period. I want to be a moose. This communicates that this choice is more your choice than the first one. You prefer this choice. Okay, that's another way you can use rather. I said earlier that rather is also used as a down toner. What is that? Well, I think you guys know intensifiers. They make ideas stronger. So like the movie was extremely fun. So fun is an adjective, but we want to make fun even stronger, so we add an intensifier. Extremely. And intensifiers are kind of adverbs, modifying the adjective. Now, if we want to just make that softer, extremely sounds like really excited, right? Extremely fun. If we want to do the opposite expression, bring it down. It was fun, but not a big deal. You might say the movie was rather fun. Okay, it was fun. It was fun, but no big deal. Other things have been more fun. So rather does the opposite of intense. We say it was really fun. It was very fun. It was extremely fun. It was incredibly fun. Or we can go the opposite direction and say, yeah, it was rather fun. Right? Not a big deal. It was fun, but not super fun. It was rather fun. That tones down the meaning of fun. Okay? So that's the different ways of using rather and prefer. Prefer is more limited. It's a verb, so you have to use it as a verb. You have to say, I prefer, I preferred, I am preferring, although that's strange because it's a state verb. Rather can do all these different functions. So rather has more uses. I just showed you 3. Whereas prefer has 1 because it's a verb. It's limited to doing verb jobs. But the meaning is the same. They're both communicating that you like this thing more than this thing. Okay? So let me just catch up to some people. Okay, joining us on the show now is Jalal from Iraq and Kurdistan. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining. I think you're new. This is Jalal Zewe from Kurdistan of Iraq. Welcome to the show. It's always great to see new friends joining. We have Robbie's sentence from before about flawless. Can you see that one? Oh, Roni is saying, I prefer the Paul class to others. Okay, good. I prefer Paul's class because it's my class. Bargain Betty says, can I give rather than take? Or I prefer to give than take. They're both fine. Can I give rather than take? Give is one option, take is the other. But those are verbs, right? So you're modifying the verbs with the adverb rather. Can I give rather than take? That's good. Or I prefer, that's the verb, to give than to take. Those are the verb complements. So good questions. We also have Zaira joining us from Mexico. Welcome to the show, Zaira. Did I miss someone else joining? Okay. In that case, guys, I'm going to take a moment to clear the board for our next breakdown. Let's get this thing cleared. Wish this was electronically able to clear. Now, I just received some unfortunate news from our technical department. For our guest scheduled to appear on the show today, unfortunately, we can't get him onto the feed. Something is wrong with the streaming system here. So my humblest apologies to Mr. Yusuke Osada, who was scheduled to join us today for the second time. And for the second time, we're unable to bring him onto the feed. So I'm sorry I wasted your time, Yusuke. Humblest apologies. Thank you for volunteering to be on this show. Unfortunately, we can't connect somehow. And despite my investigation into the streaming app, something still seems to be wrong. So unfortunately, we're not going to have Mr. Osada on our show today, which is unfortunate because he's an excellent guy and has a very interesting story to tell. However, we do have some questions to talk about. The next question I want to look at is something related to price. Someone asked me this question relating to price. Can you lower the price at $15? So this is a kind of business question. And this person says, my teacher says this sentence is wrong. Tell me why. Okay, first of all, your teacher is right. This is not quite accurate. It's not a bad sentence, but it's not quite accurate. So it sounds like a business deal. Can you lower the price? Oops. At $15. So they're trying to buy something and the price is too high, so one person is asking the other lower the price. So what's wrong with this? Well, can any of you guess what's wrong with it? It's this. It's the wrong preposition. And let's break down the parts. So we have a subject here and a verb here, and the object is here. Okay? So we know that something must lower. Something must lower, and it's the price. Now, prepositions do one thing only. They connect nouns. They connect nouns to other words, which include nouns. And the reason why is this. What do I have here I can use? Okay, we have a noun, box. Okay? What else do we have? We have... let me find something interesting here in the wall of madness. Okay, we have a little fluffy thing. We have a little fluffy character. I don't know if you can see that, but it's a little, I think it's a dust bunny from the movie Spirit Away. Okay, a little dust bunny, little character. So we have two nouns. We have the dust bunny and we have the box. If I just walk up to you and say, hey everybody, dust bunny, box. You're going to look at me like I'm crazy. I'm just telling you two nouns. There's no meaning because we don't know the relationship between these two nouns. We don't know where they are in the world, in space, in 3 dimensions. Prepositions tell us the relationship in space. So for example, dust bunny, under box. Dust bunny, noun, under, preposition, box. Now we know the relationship. Dust bunny under box. Dust bunny is under the box. Or we can say dust bunny on the box. That's the relationship between these two nouns in real-time space, okay? Or we can say dust bunny in box or inside box because you are emphasizing that we can't see it, okay? Now we know the relationship between these two objects. That's why we need prepositions. So what's happening in this sentence? Well, here's a noun, $15, the price. Or we might say the price is the noun. It's a noun. So is you. But here's the important thing about prepositions. They connect nouns, but sometimes the choice of preposition is motivated or created by the verb. And lower is one of the group of verbs of movement or change, right? Think about verbs like go, travel, walk, run, fly, okay? All of these verbs have movement. And when you use these verbs, one noun starts here and goes, travels, walks, runs, flies, or lowers over here. And how do we establish the relationship of here to there? We use the preposition from, to. So for example, I go from home to work because go is a movement verb. I travel from Canada to Brazil. Canada's one noun, Brazil is the other. What's the relationship? Well, the relationship is go from to. Okay? And if we know where you're from, we don't need to say from, we can just say to. I will go to Brazil. Okay? So that's verbs of movement, and you can think of tons of them, including verbs like listen, right? We listen to music because music moves from your stereo to your ear. Okay? I walked to the park. I flew to another country. Okay? Now, that's verbs of movement. We also have another group of verbs of change, like grow. I started life as a baby. Hard to imagine, I know. But I started my life as a baby. But I changed. Now, I didn't exactly move. Okay, I wiggled. But I changed from a baby to an adult, right? I didn't necessarily move, right? The verb grow doesn't really involve movement. It involves change. My body and my brain changed. Okay, I grew. Or the verb give. Maybe you buy a car. Well, nobody gives you the car, or you don't buy a car by someone moving it physically, although there is movement. You take it from the dealer to your home. But these are verbs of transfer or change. Okay? Lower is a verb of change. The price changes, right? And maybe the price used to be $20, but the price they wanted to lower, and that involves change. Now, it's not movement. The price isn't going to move, but it will change. In that way, we need the prepositions from and to. Changed from 20 to 15. Why? Because lower involves change. It's not an action verb that happens in one place. It's a movement or a change. So the correct preposition here should be, can you lower the price to $15? Now, you'll notice that we don't say, can you lower the price from 20 to 15? Why? Because both people in that conversation know what the price was. They know it's already 20. So they don't need to say it. They know what the price is. They want to talk about what they're going to lower it to. Okay? So that's that question. I think we have another viewer joining us. We have Ting Mai from China. Welcome to the show. Great to have you with us. Let's see what else we have here. We have Mark Zegger says the Wall of Paul. Yeah, the Wall of Paul. Isn't that funny? Great. We have Jessica joining us. Jessica from Mexico. Welcome to the show, Jessica. Mark has a preference example. Can we go back to that? He says, Lola's preference is to be inside. I would rather be outside. Good. Mark is an old friend of mine, and as I recall, loves the outdoors. So it sounds right that Mark would rather be outside. Now, I don't know who Lola is. Perhaps, Mark, you and I can catch up and you can explain who this mysterious Lola is. But it seems like Lola would rather be inside and Mark would rather be outside. Okay. Now we have another question to get to. Let's have a look at this one. In the meantime, I'm just going to have a little sip of liquid water from my English Weirdness mug. Now, if you want an English Weirdness mug, I can get you one. Contact me on social media at Hardboiled English. And I can get you a mug. Okay, our next question is whatcha, that one. Somebody asked me, teacher, should I focus on learning contractions like whatcha and gonna to sound like native speaker, like a native speaker? Okay, it's a good question. And I hear questions like this all the time. Students often ask me this kind of question. A lot of language learners want to sound more like a native speaker. So that's really what they're asking here. Behind this question about word choice and form, I think they're really asking, should I focus on trying to sound like a native speaker? My answer to that is simple. You don't have to. Okay, you don't have to. There's not really an advantage to that. I know when you're learning a language, you want to fit in, especially if you're going to live in that place. But the vast majority of you guys learning English probably won't live in Canada, or the US, or the UK, or Australia, places where English is the native language, the first language. Most of you will use English in your countries. So there isn't really the imperative to fit into the culture. And even if you lived in my country, Canada, you don't have to fit in. What's more important is that I understand what you say. That's the important thing. And this doesn't necessarily help me understand what you say. Okay, I'm going to talk about this in a minute, but I just want you to understand, no one expects you to match a native speaker's way of sounding or speaking. The important thing is for you to be clear and precise. This is always what I recommend my learners focus on. Clear and precise. Now, what does that mean? It means the other person understands you clearly. Now, that means choosing the right word, using the word flawless and not good, because good doesn't really tell us much. Flawless tells us a lot. It tells us there are no flaws in something. And also to be precise, which means whatever your idea is, your goal in communication is to express exactly that idea, precisely that idea to your friend or whoever you're talking with, right? If you want that person to lower the price to $15, you want to express that idea. You don't want to tell them, hey, $15 is great, or 20 is fine. Or I would rather have 20, I would rather pay 20 than 15. You don't want to confuse the ideas. You want your expression to match your idea precisely. And if you do that, the other person understands you clearly and precisely. That's good communication. What about your accent? Your accent doesn't matter. Okay? Don't worry about your accent. In fact, accent is partially created by the listener. Teacher, what? Let me explain. If I say something with my Canadian accent, if you're not familiar with my accent, it'll sound confusing. Okay, let me give you an example. Let's say you're traveling from your country to my country to visit. You're coming to Canada, and you go to the airport in Montreal. Maybe Mark can clarify. I think it's Duval Airport in Montreal. Duval. So you come to the airport in Montreal, and you get your bags and you go and get a taxi. And you get in the taxi, okay? And the taxi driver loves to chat, talks about politics and news and COVID-19 and all kinds of stuff. But his native language is French, and he has a strong accent when he speaks English. And maybe you're from a country like Taiwan, and you're not familiar with that accent, so you don't understand a word he says. So the taxi driver is chatting away with his English in a French accent, and you don't understand it. So Mark is clarifying. Dorval. Thank you, Mark. You're not familiar with hearing that accent, so it's very confusing to you, and you don't understand him. Okay. However, my friend Mark, he was visiting Taiwan, and he travels to Montreal, which is where he grew up. He gets into the airport in Dorval Airport in Montreal. Okay. He gets his bags, he goes to the taxi and gets the same taxi driver. Same guy that confused my Taiwanese friend. Mark gets in the taxi. Guy loves chatting. He talks about politics and sports and the bloody old days of the Expos and COVID-19, and he starts talking about that, but Mark understands him. Same guy, same taxi driver, same accent. My Taiwanese friend doesn't understand a word he says, total confusion. Mark is chatting with him. He understands him perfectly. So what's the difference? The man's accent is the same, but the two listeners, okay, Mark and my Taiwanese friend, the two listeners are different. Mark is familiar with that accent. He's heard it all his life growing up in Montreal. So he doesn't hear the accent. It doesn't affect his understanding. It affects my Taiwanese friend's understanding because they're not used to a French accent. So, who creates the accent? The taxi driver or the two different listeners? Right? So, accent is partly the responsibility of the speaker, but it's also partly the responsibility of who hears it. So, when you're learning English, don't worry about your accent. Instead, focus on clarity and precision. And that comes down to several things. Saying the word clearly, choosing the word that you want, the specific word. Every word has a specific meaning. saying the word clearly, and then using the grammar structure of the sentence that conveys the idea. If you're talking about yesterday, you need to use simple past tense. You can't use future tense. So grammar is essential in communicating the right meaning, the precise meaning. And if you do those things, nobody cares about your accent. It won't matter. Okay, how about these two examples? Whatcha and gonna. Should you learn them? Yeah, you should learn them because people say them. I say them. Let me give you an example. I'm gonna eat pizza tonight. What does it mean? It means I am going to eat pizza tonight. Now, I know what it means because I learned it when I was a child. I learned that that is the correct way to say, it's the accurate, clear, and precise way to say this future tense expression. Tonight, I am going to eat pizza. I'm going to eat pizza tonight. I learned that first. What happens, though, as you get more fluent in a language, as a child native speaker like me gets more fluent and starts chatting with their friends fast, and we're at the playground and we're talking, things get faster and words start coming together, right? And eventually, I am going to, that's 1, 2, 3 words, turns into, well, it turns into this. I'm gonna. Okay? That's the result of speed, right? And I understand what that means. And if I talk to another English native speaker, they understand what it means. But for you guys learning the language, what if you learn this and you never learn what the real meaning is, the full meaning? And then you see that in a book or you hear someone say it. Yeah, tonight I am going to eat pizza. And you hear that and you don't know what it means. So this is not a good starting point. Okay? It might make you sound like a native speaker. It might make you feel like you fit in, but it doesn't mean your communication is clear and precise, right? This comes from talking quickly, as I do sometimes. I'm going to eat pizza tonight. It's just words smashed together. It's not necessarily like a special expression or vocabulary. It's the result of speed. So how important is speed? Not very important. It's not very important. In fact, it can hurt clarity and precision. I know because I speak fast and sometimes people don't understand me. I want you to learn this because this is clear and it's precise. This is more important than learning this. This will happen to you if you learn this, right? Because this communicates a specific, precise idea clearly. Learn this. And as you become more fluent, just like I did, your speed will pick up and this will happen naturally, right? Now, I want you to understand what that means because you're going to hear it. You're going to hear it. People will say it, and I want you to understand it. But I want you guys, learners, to practice this. And as you become faster in your English learning career, this will happen naturally. But start here. Okay, that's my advice. That's the hard-boiled truth about this. Everyone wants to learn catchy phrases so they can sound like a native speaker. I don't necessarily think that sounding like a native speaker should be your goal. Sound like yourself and communicate your ideas clearly and precisely, and I'll understand you. And if I understand you, we communicate well together, okay? I think that is more important. Make that your goal and forget about this. Sounding like a native speaker. You don't need to. Or fitting in. You don't need to. If you communicate clearly and precisely to people, no matter where you are, you'll fit in. They'll understand you and welcome you to whatever community, however small or large, you're in, like a workplace or a school. If you communicate to your friends clearly and precisely, you will fit in. And why should you sound like a native speaker? There's nothing so great about being a native speaker. Sound like yourself. How do you communicate yourself? Communicate your ideas clearly and precisely. Precisely really is how you express your sense of self. Your idea should match how you present it. The problem, of course, is when you're learning a language, you may have really complex, even adult ideas, depending how old you are, but your language ability is lower, more like maybe like baby talk. I know because I've learned a language, and as an adult, my ideas are complicated, but my talking and my ability to speak is limited. So I'm talking like a baby, but thinking like an adult. That's frustrating. And you want to get those lined up, and that's precision. Okay? You want to be able to communicate your ideas the way you want to. In the meantime, I'd like to say hello to Tirath, who's joined us, and Abdul Rahman. Abdul Rahman says, I used to be a student with you, and you were the best. That's very kind of you to say, Abdul Rahman. Very kind of you to say. Thank you for joining the show. I'm humbled, and I'm honored that you're with us. I hope you're well these days. So yeah, hopefully that clears up the idea of gonna and whatcha. Whatcha is what are you going to? What are you, or what are you? What are you doing? Okay, we have one more question related to this contraction by Jessica. So let's quickly talk about that. Jessica, just give me one moment to clear the board, Paul's wall. Ain't. Ain't is a word we hear a lot. We hear it in music. We hear it on TV. It's a very common expression. The hard-boiled truth about this expression, guys, is I want you to understand what it means, but I don't think you should use it. Okay, here's why. What does it mean, first of all? Okay, it's a contraction of the be verb am. I am not a doctor. Okay, I am a teacher. I'm not a doctor. And if I use past tense, I have to say I was not a doctor last year, for example. And if I want to tell you my life experience, I have to say I have never been a doctor. If I want to talk about the future, I should maybe say I am not going to be a doctor in 2025, the future. Okay? Look at all these forms of be. Be negative. Was not, am not, was not, have never been, am not going to be. That's a lot of grammar to learn. Okay? What if we could just have one expression that communicates all of that? It'd be easier, right? I ain't a doctor. Ain't is a way of saying am not. It's a way of saying was not. So I can substitute and say I ain't a doctor. I ain't a doctor last year either. I ain't been a doctor. I ain't gonna be a doctor. How does this happen? Well, it happens in what we might call subcultures. In North America in particular, expressions like this arose from subcultures, generally of poverty, subcultures of poverty. Parts of our country, Canada, and parts of places like the US, where people weren't getting a lot of education. That's the hard-boiled truth. They didn't have a good opportunity to learn all these different forms of the be verb. So what developed from that is a simplified version of the negative be that you can use for everything. One expression. It also arose from not just poverty, but subcultures like farm culture. You know, there was a time in North American history when young people didn't go to school. A lot of young people did not go to school unless they were wealthy, 100 years ago. If your family worked on a farm, you didn't go to school and learn all these different verb forms, each one being a little more precise than the other. So this kind of word developed from that. Now, it still exists. If you watch a movie, let's say Robert De Niro movie, The Irishman, They say ain't all the time. Why? Because it's a story about gangsters. And who are gangsters? Gangsters are usually men who grow up in sort of poor areas of a city and get into mafia or organized crime because they don't go to school and have normal jobs, usually. So they haven't been to school and learned all these things. So they say this kind of thing. I ain't. You might hear it in rap music, for example. What is rap music? Well, rap music originally came from an American subculture, the African American culture of urban culture. And a lot of those young people didn't have a solid education. And this is the language that they used in their communities, a simplified version of English, kind of. And as they became popular and wealthy, and rap music became popular around the world, or all forms of music, including rock and roll music, it's not limited to African American culture. Country and Western music also uses this word a lot. It's because they're coming from that culture that really, had compromised education, at least at one point in history. And these things become kind of normal. Okay? Now you're learning the language. I don't think you should use that. I try not to use it unless I'm joking. Because, I'm fortunate. I grew up in a suburban home in Canada. I was very privileged. I had a comfortable upbringing. And I had a solid education at my high school. So if I use this, I'm not being honest with myself, right? Because I should be using this because I learned it. And I have the ability to use it. Some people don't, okay? So you guys, if you're learning English, learn these forms of the be verb. Understand what that means, but you shouldn't be using it. It's not necessary. And if you want to sort of sound like a native speaker, this doesn't make you sound like you're educated. Unfortunately, that is a perception. Okay? I want you to understand it, but I want you to use this because it's more precise. Each different grammar has a precise meaning. Okay? Now, guys, we're almost out of time. In fact, we are out of time. So I'm going to have to say goodbye in a moment. What I'd like to do is I'd like to thank all of you for joining the show. And I'd first like to say a very sincere apology for the second time to my potential guest, Mr. Yusuke Osada. I've wasted your time on 2 occasions, and I deeply apologize for that. And it's unfortunate because I wanted our audience to meet you. You're an interesting man. Okay, so I'd like to say thank you to the following people who joined our show. Thanks to Roni from Bangladesh, Betty from the Moon, Malu from Brazil. I'd like to say thank you to Mark from Canada, Wako from Japan, Yukari from Aichi, Japan. Thanks, Yukari. Satoru, originally from Japan but lives in Taiwan. Thanks to Yoshishige from Japan. Thanks to Ivana from Peru. Thanks to Tapan and Rabi from Bangladesh. Jalal from Kurdistan. Thanks to Zaira from Mexico. Thanks for joining us. Ting Mi from China. Thanks for joining us. Jessica from Mexico, I think. Abdul Rahman, you didn't say, but I think you're from Saudi Arabia. And Tirath from Bangladesh. Thank you so much for joining us. Roni's asked another question. Unfortunately, Roni, we're out of time, so I'm going to get to that next week, okay? Inductive and deductive. Did I miss anybody? Hopefully not. Okay. Guys, thank you very much for watching Hardboiled English. Just a reminder, if you'd like to join our Conversation Cafe, it runs every Thursday at 7 a.m. Vancouver time, which is PDT or called PST. So pay attention to the time zone. Find me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and you can see the link to register for the Conversation Cafe. And also, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the YouTube channel and check out our long-form series, Teacher Paul's English Weirdness. Okay? Thank you for watching the show, guys. It's been a pleasure helping you explore the mysteries of English. As your humble language detective, I thank you for watching the show every week. What I'd like you to do in the meantime is keep studying, keep learning, keep practicing. Stay safe, because we're not finished this pandemic yet, although the sun is shining and the light is visible at the end of the tunnel. Until I see you next time, guys, stay safe and stay cool. you.